Hi everyone, my name is Katie Healy and I am writing my presentation on if Americans are actually overtaxed. In this PowerPoint and in this presentation, we're going to be discussing 5 things. We're going to be discussing the public understanding of taxes, which can be very heavily misconstrued. We're also going to be discussing the types of U.S. taxes as it is a very lengthy list. How much revenue the government takes, this is also a very significant factor. Where do our tax dollars go, and are we actually overtaxed? So why does it matter? So taxation affects every American individually, and there's a huge public debate around the fact is if it's actually fair and is it truly efficient in keeping the country going. And how taxes are perceived versus the reality of it is also a very huge topic of discussion because not many people understand how taxes truly work and how everything is distributed. So what drives the public dissatisfaction with how we are taxed? So there's a rising cost of living all across the country. So gas prices constantly varying, groceries, and another huge thing is first-time home buyers are not buying their first house until way later in life, and this is a huge statistic because of how expensive things are getting. The price of houses, the price of rents, everything is just skyrocketing in recent years. There's a very huge confusion on how the tax brackets work, why you're taxed the percentage that you are, and why they take so much money out of your paychecks. There's an increased amount of taxes withdrawn from your paycheck with the more money that you generate. And the amount of government spending towards things like Social Security, infrastructure, education, there's many people that believe that it is far too much. There is a very progressive tax system with the federal income tax and how it works. So there's 7 marginal brackets: 10, 12, 22, 24, 32, 35, and 37%. These percentages reflect the amount of taxes applied depending on how much you make. For example, 12% is applied if you make between $11,000 and $47,000. And very distinctly, high income individuals pay a large portion of federal income tax. So how everything is still distributed. In simple terms, we could put it like this. Top 1% earners pay a larger share of federal income taxes, and the bottom 50% pay a significantly smaller share, although not many people may agree with that. So Americans being quote unquote overtaxed can heavily depend on which Americans. So the overall view on federal income taxes, there was a 2023 poll that had found that 60% of Americans say their federal income taxes are too high, which is a very common theme. There were only about 46% in this poll that said their taxes were fair. And even though 46% may seem like a lot, it is a very astounding low percentage considered to past years. Federal taxes are viewed as the most unfair tax to pay, despite the Social Security and property taxes that come out of it. Things that may have led to this can be rising costs with inflation and rising incomes that have wavered the perception of the low, middle, and high class income households. There was a national tax literacy poll done in 2024. They conducted a poll to assess the average American's knowledge of how taxes work. The results indicate that Americans are dissatisfied with the tax code entirely, and there was actually more than 80% of Americans in 2024 that thought that the U.S. federal tax code needs to be reformed. And this is an astounding number. How many taxes do we actually pay? It is a very lengthy list. So Americans pay various types of different taxes, and the cost of them can vary by state. Some examples include federal income tax, state income tax, payroll tax, things like Medicare, Social Security, sales tax, capital gains tax, estate tax, inheritance tax. Now, inheritance taxes, not every state has them. New Jersey is actually one of the few states that still includes a inheritance tax. So the amount of taxes each American pays contributes to the overall assumption that we are overtaxed. The federal revenue, and where does it come from? So individual income taxes and payroll taxes are the main sources for federal revenue. In 2023, individual income taxes, federal, state, and local, made up 39.9% of U.S. tax revenue, according to the Tax Foundation. And this is a significant burden to the working class, and I like to go by the phrase, the more money you make, the more that they take. Further, our tax dollars go towards things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and funding public school districts. For example, the US government in the 2024 fiscal year spent $6.9 trillion. 9/10 of this total only went towards federal spending and programs. The remaining amount went to paying off federal debt interest. So, two examples. In 2024, 21% of this budget, or $1.5 trillion, was spent on Social Security, which provided monthly retirement benefits in September 2024, averaging close to $2,000 to 51.5 million retired workers. Another 13% of the budget, or $872 billion, was spent on national defense activities. This includes things like largely for operations and maintenance in the Defense Department, military personnel, procurement of weapons, and research, development, testing, and evaluation. This percentage and this amount of money spent on national defense activities is key in keeping our defense departments running and keeping our military funded. Another factor that we have to consider here is the state and local taxes, which usually many people have a lot of things to say about. Significant state and local taxes depend on states. So, for example, New Jersey has one of the highest property taxes on the eastern seaboard. Their property tax rate is 2.23%, which can be up to $10,000 in some areas, and this impacts some homeowners. State income tax percentages around the country have a wide range of 0% to 13 or less than 13%. In some households, property taxes can exceed federal income taxes, which makes it difficult for many to stay financially afloat. A lot of our federal income taxes come or go to Social Security costs. There is something called the Social Security COLA, which stands for the Social Security Cost of Living Adjustments. There's almost an adjustment every year made. So in recent years, there's been an increase in Social Security costs and distribution, which has led to an increase in government spending. For example, Social Security benefits will be increased by 2.8% for 2026 recipients. There will be 71 million Social Security recipients in 2026. And in this chart, you can obviously see that it has just ever since 2020, the Social Security costs have skyrocketed. This poll or this chart was taken in 2022, and costs rose about 8.7% in 2022 and 3. But it also begs the question, are taxes high or are the costs high? So that's a big thing that we have to consider when we talk about overtaxation. So there's two main things. We can argue for it, and there's several counter arguments that we can make here. So arguments for overtaxation. Obviously, there's a very high public opinion. So many people are very discontent. 60% of people claim income taxes are far too high. Due to the sheer amount of taxes, it increases the burden on many working class individuals. The working class has been the number one class that has been taking the beatings with the increase in taxes and inflation. And obviously, inflation just makes things worse for everyone all around. Counter arguments: the system is progressive, which leads to the wealthy paying more. But there is a blurred line. Many people in the upper middle class are getting taxed as if they are the higher class. So taxes fund many essential programs like housing assistance, Social Security, health, education, government debt, which is ever so increasing, and infrastructure. Like, for example, Pennsylvania and New Jersey has some of the worst infrastructure in the tri-state area. Many of our tax dollars sometimes go towards paying those blue-collar workers that pay for those roads. But, however, not everyone is fully educated on what money goes where, and that's very important understanding when you're paying your own taxes. There's many debates to this topic. Taxes vary by state, with some being outrageously high. Due to inflation and taxes, the middle class is ultimately being erased, as some middle class households are taxed as if they're the upper class, as I've stated previously. The federal income taxes source many government programs that many people depend on to live. Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid get a lot of people to the doctor when they need it, when they can't truly afford insurance. Overtaxation solely depends on the individual's income level and type of taxes they pay. I believe that is our bottom line when we talk about are we actually overtaxed or not. How would Social Security benefits be paid otherwise? And another question that we have to ask ourselves is there any way to lessen the Social Security budget? Although there is a higher defense budget than Social Security, as the years go on, we need to ask ourselves, what can the government do to lessen the budget? Why is it so outrageously expensive? What can we do to avoid being overtaxed? These are my sources. Thank you.